Um, he hasn't been able to be back in since. He went down to City Hall today, and they were just, I mean, they're not getting any help from anybody. The government, any of the local governments, the federal government, no one's helping them get in. So I'll just show you a couple pictures. I won't show you all of them, but this was the church. This was the church. This was the church. He had just moved in to the church, 6 months ago, and yeah, you can't. He was, bless you. He just moved 6 months ago to L.A. So yeah, it says, "Join us for a joyful Christmas season." That's the sign. There you can see it a little bit there. Look at that's the bell tower behind, right behind the sign is the bell tower. So I'll show you. This was a press conference we had there. That's the bell tower, and that's the sanctuary. And I was just going to show you the school. I mean, it was still. I'll just show you this. It was still smoldering. You could still see the. You could still see it was smoldering. So you're walking on the roof. That's the bell tower, and going back towards the front of the building. Um, that's the tower. That was the tallest building in Palisades. That building, and it's across the street from this. I was going to show you. Um, that's that building. The other tower is the elementary school. That's Palisades Elementary School, and that isn't all destroyed, but a good chunk of it is destroyed. But their tower was not destroyed. I thought that picture that looked like a 9/11 picture because that was just twisted frame. And then I'll just show you. That's the back from the church looking down into Pali High. There's nothing. That's street after street after street. That's what that looks like. So I've never seen anything like that. It looks like it was bombed. So that's looking north towards the hills towards PCH. Yeah, I was here. This is not 90. This was not the earthquake. The earthquake left destruction. You could drive down Reseda and you'd see like a building that was gone and then another building that wasn't. This is acres and acres and acres and acres. This was um this was going up Sunset from PCH. Well, I was putting it up behind there. There was no one there. Mike, there was no one there. Mike, there was no one there. There was no one on the street. I mean, look, I'm driving up Sunset. There's nobody on the street. You can't drive there. So there was nothing. I didn't have to worry about it, but I did put it. I tried to put it up on the front, but it didn't work. It wasn't. It didn't work. So I couldn't do what I wanted to do, which was kind of drive through and just leave it. But I couldn't do that. It wasn't working. I'll show you one video that was a few seconds because there is one. No, no. That the cars. I didn't go by that. I only went to a certain. I didn't drive around. I didn't. I wasn't there touring. I mean, I went to. Oh, I can't even like the way I came in. We had to go all around. We went to one place. They said you had to go to the next entrance. Everything was shut off by National Guards people. And then once you can find a place to go through, you have to get a police escort to get into the. So they have every entry point blocked off by National Guards. And then once you can find a place to go up, then you can and then once you're in, you can kind of go where you want. Also, my friend Brenda, a lot of people might remember Brenda Cox. She used to live here in Santa Clarita. She's lived in Palisades for like 15, 20 years already. She lives in an apartment that was not destroyed, and she asked me to go in and get some stuff for her that she had left, medicines and jewelry and stuff like that. It could be the same apartment building. It's right on right by PCH, and oh, so this is just going up. This is going up Sunset, if you can see that. But like you'll see that part, like these apartments were all saved, and you pretty much will see fire trucks, and there's fire trucks from all across the West. You know, a lot of from California, but I saw ones from Nevada. uh, Saw ones from somebody said there were Wyoming and Montana were there too. But look, I mean, look, those things are just. I mean, I, I can't. I don't know. I can't describe it because this, like I said, this goes on for miles. This goes all the way up to get to you get to that's Benavida, but it goes all the way up to Chautauqua. There's there's nothing on some. Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is just. I can't describe it other than it's like it's been bombed. Yeah, it looks like it's some of them have been cut down. You can see there's like a lot of trees that they cut down because they were on fire, so they just cut them down. The fire department must have cut them or something, so they were hazardous for people on the if they were gonna come through the road. So yeah, they've cut down a lot of trees. Like there's a lot of like trees that have been the big ones, old ones. Look, I've said this before. I think Palisades, Brentwood, that part, Santa Monica, that's some of the most beautiful places in America and in the world, really. And it's gone. I mean, a third of that area of Santa Monica, whatever that coastal, whatever you want to call it, it's just that. I mean, that is God's country, and it's gone. It's gone. So, yeah, we're gonna keep figuring out if there's ways for us to help. Right now, I think we just there's not much to do because no one knows what the next steps are. But when we know what the next steps are, we'll let people know who needs help. And I reached out to Pasadena Jewish Center too, and I haven't heard anything from them. They actually don't have a head rabbi right now. They have an educator. She's a rabbi, but she's not the senior whatever. They were going through some rabbinic transition. Yeah, and their cantor. But I reached out to the Rabbi Emeritus, Rabbi Colin and Gil Colin. I reached out to him. I figured maybe he would know, and what we can do to help. And yeah, there's just the synagogue in Palisades, as I told people, it's survived. We don't know how. No, no, no. The Palisades synagogue is fine. Pasadena is the only synagogue that was destroyed. The Chabad and Kehilat Israel, the big Reconstructionist synagogue in Palisades. It's weird because it's like a Reform synagogue or conservative synagogue, but it's actually Reconstructionist. It was destroyed next door. There's another church destroyed. NBC News went in with them, and it was on local news, and then it made the national news. They survived. There's three rabbis there, emeritus and two, a junior and a senior rabbi. All their homes are gone. Rabbi Stephen Carr Ribbon was there for I think 25 years, 30 years. He was a rabbi there. He still lives in the area, and his home is gone. And the rabbi who's there, the senior rabbi, Rabbi Amy, she her home is gone, and she just lost her wife. Had just died 6 months ago, and I did just found that out, and I didn't know. She had that too that she was dealing with. So, yeah, it's. I mean, I don't know for everybody there, but like I said, I'm trying to figure out what we can do and what's going to be the most effective way to help people. And I got a beautiful message. I don't know if you guys saw. I don't post a lot on Facebook. I don't like to post silly things or whatever. But there's a very nice message that the people in Israel posted, thinking of us. Yeah, and I posted it today. I'm gonna show it real quick. This is Adele Raymer, who was here at the shul when we had the people from. Yeah, she's a tough lady, and I really appreciated what she said. So I'm just gonna play it for those of you who did not see it. Um this is Adele's message that she had. She just posted. I mean, I just got this today. So Let me post it.
Refugee in my own land for over 460 days. And although it has happened under very different circumstances, these past couple of days, my eyes and my heart have been on the ravaging destruction of the fires in California. I've been thinking about people I know who live there, people who have been friends for years, as well as those who I just met through my recent public diplomacy trips. These people have been so helpful and empathetic to me and my community, and many of them have either lost their homes or know people who are close to them who have lost their homes. So, as one refugee in my own land to another, I'm sending you virtual hugs and thoughts of optimism for the future, especially to those in the Jewish communities who were there for us in our hour of need. I want you to know that we in Israel are also here for you. I'm hoping you'll be able to go home very soon and rebuild your lives, because I know how important it is to hold on to that optimism.
So we're going to be seeing Adele next week. Those of us who are going to go to Israel,
So I just met through
we're
my
going
recent
to
public
go to her
diplomacy trips.
kibbutz. Sorry,
These people have been so helpful.
we're going to go to her kibbutz, or we're going to. She's might be coming to our hotel, but I was on the phone with them today, not her, but to the other kibbutzim and some of the other friends that I have in Israel, asking them what they think about this deal that has now been announced. By the way, I don't want to. I only want to share with you. You notice Adele wears the date too. She picked that up for me. She said we went out to dinner before she came here, and she said, "I want to tell you. I know." She says, I really appreciate you wearing that." She says, "I think I'm going to start doing that too." So that was that's something she's been doing since she was here in September. But I didn't talk to her, but I talked to some of my friends and acquaintances in Israel and asked them how they feel about this deal. And they said, well, look, we're not excited. We're not happy. We're relieved. We feel a sense of, you know, maybe we're close to the end of this trauma, but she says the trauma will be with us for a long time, beyond whenever these people come home. So, uh, oh no, Mike, this is going to be 33 or 40 or however many people actually get to walk out of there for 5,000, 6,000, yeah, maybe 3,000, 4,000, but no, it's going to be a lot. And again, the issue is how many of the people that are going to be released that Hamas is demanding are actually, hardcore terrorists. These are, babies and seniors that are being released for people, as we know, who have blood on their hands. We don't know. No, of the 33, there's 33 living people. Correct. Yeah, Sinwar, the guy who organized this, who directed this October 7th slaughter, he was part of the exchange for Gilad Shalit 18 years ago. He was released from Israeli prisons. And, they've interviewed his, you can see it. One of the news channels interviewed one of the doctors that met with him. He was treated in the hospital too in Israel, by the way. They helped save his life. He had some health issues, and not related to being in jail. He was sick with some stuff, and they helped save his life. And some of the people who knew him in Israel, some of the Israelis who interacted with him, said he was a dangerous guy. And he had learned Hebrew while he was in Israeli prisons. He spent a lot of time paying attention to the Israeli mentality and kind of understanding how to do what he did, which was took a lot of attention to detail and attention to yeah. So yeah, this is the question of, are there many Sinwars that are going to be released in this exchange? So that's why Israelis know. They know that it's not a theoretical question. It happened. It's not maybe it happened. So that's why they're very torn. They're very for the most part. I haven't spoken to anybody who's ecstatic about it. I haven't heard one person say to me, thank God it's over. Nobody has said that, which we kind of knew. I mean, there was no exit out of this unless every member of Hamas was dead. There was not going to be any way for this to end like this. There's no way to make these people surrender. So they were never going to surrender. They were never going to say, oh, we're not going to hate you anymore. So there's no place to draw a line and say, you lost. So it was never going to end well, unfortunately. The way it ended well for Israel is that their most dangerous terrorists and the leaders of especially Hezbollah were taken off. When you talk about what was a victory, it was a victory over Hezbollah, which had obviously not direct connection to Hamas, but was part of the war. And so if you want to know what war Israel did win, it won the war with Hezbollah. And by the way, the people who benefited the most from that are the people of Lebanon and the people of Syria. So if you want to know who really benefited the most, I mean, Israel benefited because hopefully there won't be rocket attacks from Lebanon, but there weren't really. The rocket attacks were coming from Gaza. And so the question is, how long will it take for Hamas to reoccupy and restructure and get rockets again facing towards Israel? I mean, that's what some people are talking about. Is it a year, 2 years? When will the next rocket come over from Hamas in Gaza? So, look, they were launching missiles, rockets, a month ago, 3 weeks ago, even. The end of the year, they were still finding ways to launch rockets from their positions in Gaza. So it's happening now. I mean, it's not a question of whether it'll happen a year from now. I guess it's a question of how often it will come. So it's good news that some people will hopefully come home and be safe and be free again. I mean, everyone's wondering, is a 1.5-year-old Kfir, is he one of those people that's going to be taken out? A young child, an infant who's spent 90% of his life in a captivity? Nobody knows. I haven't heard. I don't know. So we'll see. We'll see, folks. And some of us will be there, right, John? You'll be there even before I will. So you may be there as I hope you'll be there when some of these people are going to come home. And we're going to visit with some of the people who were released in the last maybe not this time, I doubt, but probably in the previous people who survived we'll be talking to. Anyways, so today we're coming to the end of this section of the Talmud of Berachot, which I think we might finish today. I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to rush through it, and I knew we were going to talk about a little bit what happened in Israel. It was very important. I will tell you, we're in 61, and we're starting with where we finished off was we talked about 61a. We talked about this line right here, which was, God does everything for the best. It's very appropriate tonight. We finished with this story of Rabbi Akiva and the fact that he got turned out of a town once, and he, just to remind you, he went, it's a famous story, so you should know it if you don't know it. Again, we shared it last week. He came to a certain city. He tried to get a lodging there, which is like the Jesus story, right? There's no room at the inn for him, so he had to sleep out in the field. And he had with him a rooster, a donkey, and a candle. So it says a wind came and extinguished the candle, which meant, by the way, he had no light, right? So he had no light at night. Then a cat came and ate the rooster. So now he has no way of waking up. Took his alarm clock. And a lion came and ate the donkey, which means now he doesn't even have a way to get out of town or get back on the road because his transportation's gone now. So it's like, you can imagine the modern equivalent is the guy wants to stay overnight in a hotel. There's no room in the hotel, so he parks by the side of the road, puts up a tent. He wakes up the next day, his car's stolen. Someone took his wallet and his phone. He's got nothing. How's he gonna get back on the road? What happened? Right? He says everything God does for the best. That night, an army came and took the city in captivity. That town that he was supposed to go to ended up getting invaded and destroyed. He was not in the city. He had no candle, no noisy rooster or donkey to give away his location. So nothing gave him away. The army couldn't see him because he had no light. They couldn't hear the donkey or the rooster making noise. So that's how he got spared. So this is an example. If he thought everything was bad, turned out it's not bad. Now, that's not the end of Rabbi Akiva's story, because we're going to read the end of Rabbi Akiva's story today. But before we get to Rabbi Akiva's story, we're going to skip ahead a little bit. And we're going to read a very interesting story about how Adam and Eve were, well, more importantly, how Eve was created. And so we're going to read from, if you look down, we're going to go a little bit further in talking about, I'm going to start here. I'll start here. I'll start right afterwards. 61a3. It says, Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda said, what is the meaning of that which is written? Then the Lord formed Vayetzer Adam. Now in the Torah, there's two yuds. It says Vayetzer Adonai Elohim. So you see there's two yuds there. And so the rabbis say, why is there two yuds? Why are there two yuds? And they say, the Holy One, God, created us with two inclinations, one good and one bad. And we call those a yetzer, an inclination. And of course, the yetzer begins with the word yud. And it also sounds like yetzer. It sounds like the word yetzer. So it's almost as if like you could split the word yetzer with two yuds into two words, yetzer hatov and yetzer hara. And we talked about this before. This is the famous Star Trek episode, right? Which, by the way, I just heard them talking about Colbert had Ben Stiller on. Ben Stiller bought the tunic that evil Spock wears in the one where he gets separated, right? The two Yetzers of Kirk, sorry. When Kirk gets separated into good Kirk and bad Kirk. That's what the two Yetzers are. They're the good inclination and the bad inclination. But again, Judaism tells us we need both. We have to have both of them. And what is so important about them? Again, God created us. Double Yud tells us there's two Yetzers. It's Yetzer. So, Rav Nachman bar Yitzhak strongly objects to this. He says, if that's so, does an animal, with regard to whom a Yetzer is Vayetzer is not written with a double Yud, does he not have an inclination? Don't animals have an inclination? So if you're asking, does your dog have an inclination? Look, don't we see it causes damage and bites and kicks? Your dog has an evil inclination, especially when it tears apart a pillow. That's the dog's bad inclination. That's what they are saying. So animals are created with yetzers, aren't they? Interesting. So if animals are created with yetzers, it doesn't say it for that. So what does it mean? Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi says, this alludes to the difficulty of human life. Woe unto me from my creator, Yotzri, and woe unto me for my inclination. So what does it mean? Our creator and our Yetzer both can be tough on us. I would put it that way. Right? But maybe there's also a secret here. Well, it's not really a secret, but the clue is in the Torah. There also could be a reason why it says Yetzer, or an implication that there are two Yuds, is this. The Holy One, blessed be He, created two faces on Adam. And the word is in Aramaic is du partsufim. The first man, he was created both male and female in a single body. And there's a line from Psalms that says, you have formed me, sartani, behind and before. And if you understand that word, maybe there was two faces, two sides of Adam, a male side and a female side. Now, this is a really interesting idea, which is that the first human being was created because it says in the Torah that God created man, male and female. He created them. That's what it says in Genesis chapter 1. Now we can say, well, there's two different stories. There's a Genesis chapter 1 story where it says that Adam and Eve were created separately, but they were created by God on the last day of creation, and they were created at the same time. There's another story, the second chapter, which is very different than that creation story. In that creation story, actually, Adam and Eve are created before even the animals. If you look at that story carefully, God creates animals and brings them before Adam and says, Adam, what do you think of this animal? Would you like to live with it? And he goes, no, I don't want that animal. I mean, essentially, that's what he does. And then finally, God causes Adam to sleep and then pulls him apart, right? Now, that's what this is based on. The fact that the Torah tries to find a way to bring those two stories together without saying, hey, these are written by two different people. Because the rabbis would never say that. They wouldn't say, hey, we have two different versions of the story. They'd say, how do these two stories exist? Well, the first person was created with male and female. Now, this is an interesting idea, by the way, because this means that Adam, in the first place, was a hermaphrodite, had both organs. It needed to be separated in order to some extent to be whole, which also is interesting because that also tells us that a human being may have both genders. How? Because the first person did. Not only did the first person have both, you could say that's the way the first human being was created. It was only later beings that were created with separate genders. This is a really interesting idea, and one that really allows for us to have a more, I think, a sympathetic idea of not so much sexuality, but gender identity. And I've mentioned this before. The rabbis said that there are not two genders. They were firm believers, the rabbis, in non-binary ideas, and part of it comes from these midrash, from these explanations. So they said, what are the six? There's six genders, male and female, right? Hermaphrodite, someone that has both male and female. Someone who is asexual, who really doesn't have either one. Kind of amorphous, unspecified gender. And that's your first four. And the other two was someone who was predominantly male but had female characteristics. And the other one was someone who was female who was primarily female but had male characteristics. So those were the six genders that the Talmud talks about. So the Talmud actually talks about this, these different gender identities. And of course, this is important because they're trying to figure out what's a mitzvah for a man to do and what is the determining factor of what makes somebody a man or not. Now, if you think that this is not like this is some kind of weird thing that the rabbis talked about, it was a real issue. People biologically would be born as a hermaphrodite. What do you do with them? What do you consider them? So these are issues that the Talmud talks about, and it talks about it very frankly. It's not they're not shying away from it. They don't try to say, hey, look, that we can't answer that. They tried to answer it. They tried to answer it with a sense of we take this seriously. So the fact that they said the first human was a hermaphrodite wasn't based on some fantasy that a person, no one really is created like a hermaphrodite. They knew people were hermaphrodites, and they said the first human being was. So, and by the way, I'm going to say it, but it's pretty obvious. The concept of hermaphrodite in the Greek word is Hermes and Aphrodite, right? The two of the Greek gods. And so some Greeks and Romans worshipped a combination of those two the god and goddess together. So that's how the word comes into our language, is through the Greek gods of Hermes and Aphrodite. So it's long been known. It's not like a new thing. So this is why they throw it out there, and they're saying, hey, maybe if he was. So now we're going to get into, okay, so he was. Then what? And so they like, Okay, I will tell you this is relevant because we had a discussion about gender issues back. This was back when Prop 8 was on the ballot, about 15 years ago, and we had a discussion about it. It was about 2008, 2009, 2008, I think, that election. And I mean, we had a discussion with clergy, and I said, look, the Talmud tells us that this is a possibility that the first person was not created with a single gender. So, the fact that you're arguing over this, like for a fact, it's at least possible. The rabbis don't say this in a stupid, nonsensical, fantasy way. They're not throwing this out there because they're being stupid. They're trying to understand this conflict in the Torah where it says they were created together and then it says they were created separate, that Adam was created first. So let's look at what happens. This is the way they envision at least part of what could happen. So the first question is, are they face to face, or or how are they created? Like, was the first person half man, half woman, like with two heads, or was there like next to each other, or were they back to back? I'm just going to tell you, this is going to get to some interesting stuff. So, and it actually is, it is relevant, and I think tells us a little bit about human nature. Or again, was it a different part, like a different side? So here's one possibility. I wasn't going to dwell too much on this. So it says, it was stated in the Torah in Genesis in chapter 2, in the second version, it says, and the tzellah which the Lord God had taken from the man, he made a woman, and he made her and brought her into the man. So the word in Hebrew is a tzellah, which is usually translated as side or rib, right? A lot of people translate it as rib. But you'll see that's not the only way it can be translated. Rav and Shmuel disagree over the meaning of the word tzellah. One said it means face. Eve was originally one face or side of Adam. And one said it means a tail, which he explains to mean that the tzellah was an appendage, as in one of the ribs in Adam's chest, or an appendage. I want to say that's the commentary. It could be that literally the rabbis just told us. By the way, some people feel that this story explains why women have one less rib cage than rib on their body than a man. That's not true, by the way, but that's what some people said. It explains the human body, why human male and human female are different. That's not true, by the way. There's other distinctive differences between normally in most situations, of course, not every situation, between a male and female anatomy. But that's not what they just said. What they really said, which is why it says tail, that the first human being, Adam, had a tail. And this is actually a midrash to explain why human beings don't have a tail. God took that tail and made it into Eve. So you all thought it was a rib. Well, maybe it's a story of why human beings don't have a tail. God took that little tail off and made Eve out of it. Interesting. Well, definitely he took something, right? Goes all the way from a whole side of his body to maybe a tail. You can understand, by the way, there's a little bit of a agenda there too, which is Eve was created out of your butt, out of your tailbone. That's not a very complimentary thing. If she's one half of you, and she's equal to you, but if she's your tail on your, off your tail, it's not very important. But it also explains why human beings don't have tails. So they dispute this, right? They go through this, they show the dispute. Granted, according to the one who said that tzellah means face, that is why it's written, you have formed me behind and before. That's the line from Psalms. However, according to the one who said that tzellah means tail, what is meant by the verse, you have formed me, tsartani, behind and before? How would they understand that? The Gemara answers, it can be explained in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Ami. As Rabbi Ami said, behind means Adam was created at the end of the act of creation, and before means that he was first for punishment. So when it says before and after, they're actually talking about not the parts of the body, but how they were going to be punished when God holds them accountable. Adam is punished before Eve. hold off. I mean, they're going to explain that. So this is the punishment explanation. We're going to get to that. The Gemara asks, granted, Adam was behind or last in the act of creation, meaning that he was not created until the sixth day of Shabbat, until the Shabbat Eve, right before Shabbat, so Friday night. However, before or first for punishment, what punishments does this refer to? If you say that he was first for punishment in the wake of the episode with the snake, wasn't it taught in a Baraita that with regard to punishment, Rabbi Judah Hanasi says, in conferring honor, one begins with the greatest, in cursing, one begins with the least significant. So how is this? How do we know that when you honor somebody, you start off with the biggest person first? You're honoring a bunch of people. We start with the biggest one and then we work our way down. When we curse, we start with the least significant and work our way up. Right? Which is what happens with the snake. So, and here's another interesting lesson here, right? And so when you give honor to someone first, look at this. This little story. I mean, this is the first part. In conferring honor, one begins with the greatest, as it says, Moses said unto Aaron and Eleazar and Ithamar, his remaining sons, take the meal offering. So Aaron, who was the greatest, is mentioned first. So Aaron, Moses says to Aaron, Eleazar, and Ithamar. So then, you know Aaron's the most important. But when you curse, one begins with the least significant. The snake was cursed first, then Eve was cursed, and then Adam was cursed. So the punishment did not begin with Adam because they're assuming, everybody, that Adam was more significant than Eve. So they're not introduced that way in the curse. They're introduced that way if they were being rewarded. So that's an interesting idea that this had to do with the punishment in the Garden of Eden. By the way, clearly, folks, this is not original sin. Why is it not original sin? Because they're talking about the punishment as if it's just a normal punishment, not that it's the fall from grace that requires everything to be restarted and to some extent for there to be a Jesus to wipe away the original sin. Here you clearly see they got punished. It was bad. And then they got punished, again, which is what this talks about, which is it's not the punishment in the garden. That wasn't even a bad punishment compared to this punishment, which was the punishment of the flood. Because there it says, and he blotted out every living substance which was on the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping things and fowl of the heaven. The punishment there begins with man and then the animals and then other creatures. So there, men are said before the animals. So there, it's a punishment. And it's a big punishment. It's a punishment for everything and every living thing. And it starts with man. So there's an example of punishment where the bigger was given the credit first. So now we go back to this discussion of the face. So the rabbis said, I said this is a little bit of a longer tangent, but it's an interesting one because we're going to read an interesting line coming up here. Granted, according to the one who said that Eve was originally a face or side of Adam, that is why it is written Vayetzer with a double yud, which alludes to two formations. So why does that say two yuds at the beginning? Because it's two very significant creations, two sides. Don't say it's a tail. It wouldn't have said Yetzer with two yuds, right? That's for two creations, two faces. Now, however, according to the one who said she was a tail or an appendage of Adam, what is conveyed by the spelling of Vayetzer? So for those people who say it's only a tail, why is the Vayetzer there? Why is the double yud there? And that is because, again, according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, he said, that which a person says to himself in every circumstance, woe unto me for my creator and woe unto me for my inclination, which is that my God and my inclination are going to hold me accountable. And that's the two Yetzers. My creator, my Yetzer, my creator, and my Yetzer, which is my inclination. It's an interesting idea. The inclination itself, one could say the good inclination that's going to hold you accountable for your bad thing, or just the fact that your inclinations are directing you, and your God directs you and your inclinations direct you, and you're kind of messed up with both. It's a really weird idea, and it's one that I think actually I think is very very powerful, because people who kind of try to evaluate why they do the things that they do, if they're self-reflective about it, at the end of the day, you ask yourselves. And again, I don't want to harp on this. I don't know. I mean, I think the rabbis were onto something, because you can call whatever you want, but it's that argument: is it nature or nurture? Are you hardwired to make the decisions that you? And there's big arguments, by the way, amongst psychologists and biologists and neuroscientists, whether you're hardwired to make the decision. Like, you think that you're making decisions, but your brain has already been hardwired. It's the stuff is already pre-wired. You cannot do anything other than basically make the decisions you make, which is kind of weird. I mean, there are people who argue this. By the way, the consequences of that are essentially that, like, if you wind up in prison, that's the way you were born. For other people who would say, no, it's your, it's under your control, which to some extent makes it even more pressing, because you could change. And I'm not saying that's any easier, but it is another possibility. Is it my God, right? Is it my creation, or is it my inclinations? Is it my psychology? Is it my constant inability to control myself, because I don't want to control myself? So that's the interesting, I think, modern version of saying this. But people still have this argument. But we're going to talk about this. Back to the male and female. Granted, according to the one who says that Eve was a face, that is why it's written, male and female, he created them, which repeats it again in Genesis chapter 5, right before the flood. However, according to the one who said that Eve was a tail, what is the meaning of the verse, male and female, he created them? So if Eve was just a tail, why does it say male and female? The Gemara says it can be explained in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Abahu. As Rabbi Abahu raised a contradiction between the verses. On one hand, it is written, male and female, he created them. And on the other hand, it is written, for in the image of God, he made man, which is Genesis chapter 9, indicating that man was created alone. How then does he resolve that contradiction? At first, the thought entered God's mind to create two, and ultimately only one was actually created. So when it says that God said, let us make man in our image, that's where God says, I'll make man and women, and then he only makes man. So like God changed his mind, not changed his mind, but just only ended up creating one. It's just weird. Like God was going to do it and then didn't. God only created a man. That's another explanation. It's another possibility. Not one that we love or we talk about, but it's one that they say is a possibility. The Gemara asks, granted, according to the one who said that Eve was a face, why is it written? And he took one of the sides and closed up the place with the flesh in its place, which is what it says after the creation. If it's a whole face, how could God just close up the side? If he just took out a rib or he just took out a tail, why does it say that? So, however, according to the one who said Eve was originally a tail, what is meant by the verse, and close up the flesh in its place? Rabbi Yirmiyahu said, some say, Rav Nachman said, it was necessary to say only with regard to the place of incision. So either it's your whole side that God cut him in half, or God just took off a piece. You don't really know based on that. They're saying whatever God did to Adam to heal him, we don't really know. Okay? We don't know. Either he closed up a side or he closed up a rib or a tail. The bigger question is, did Adam have a belly button? People have asked that before. One of those thoughts. Did he have a belly button? Because we don't have a tail. Well, we have a little piece, right? The coccyx bone is a tailbone, right? So they said there was tail there, and God snipped it off. Look, it's all an explanation for us to try to figure out, what does it mean when God says he closed up the flesh where he made that cut? So if it's a whole side, look, that's kind of one of the weird things. It's like if he closed up his side, Well, then he cut him off. He cut off Eve and then made a, like, would he need to make an incision because he just cut her off and then made another person? Or did he cut off a piece of Adam and then make it out of there? That's what they're basically asking. Like, look, their problem is they can't say there's two different authors. They can't say that. They can't say that. But they're saying that even in the same story, there's a question of, again, what happened to Adam when this surgery happened? But now, look at not just the surgery, my friends. Look at this. The Gemara. What? I don't know. I don't know. Did he create it? The argument. I don't think it's in the Talmud. I don't think it's in the Talmud. But yeah, it's not. But the possibility they had a belly button is that God made him the way other human beings would come after him, with the exception that, like, was after that people usually weren't created with both. Sometimes they were, but maybe he made a belly button, just a fake belly button, an itty or outie, I might guess. Make him look like his boy would look one day. He was wanting his boy to say, "Look, the bigger question was he circumcised." The rabbis definitively say that he was circumcised, right? They say he was born circumcised. God created him circumcised. I was not a Jew, right? I know what you're going to say. Abraham wasn't. But the first human being, the rabbis didn't like the idea that he was not created already pre-circumcised. They didn't like that. But look at this story. This is the one you don't know. Mary, you'll like this one. According to the view that Eve was a tail, why was it written, and God built the Tzela? It was a completely new building, right? He made it. It says, and God took the rib, right? He did something with it, and he, like, built it, right? The word is he kind of built it. So if God took a little piece of tail and turned it into Eve, then he clearly did some work. But he did some genetic engineering. He took some DNA, put it in a dish, and then out came Eve. He got to do a lot off a tail. But, so the rabbis say, so why does it say he built her up? If he just split her in half, what would the guy who says she was split in half, what would God do? God didn't build her up. He just split her in half. He split it in half. What does it mean? And he built. What does that mean? I could see the guy who says, right, that he took a tail and built it up. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. The Gemara responds, this must be interpreted homiletically, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh. He said, what is the meaning of written? And it was written that God built the Tzela, took that piece. He took her side, right? He took Eve, he made her, split her off, made her, and he braided her hair and then brought her to Adam. As the coastal towns, they call braiding hair building. So the word in Hebrew to build, to bana, leave note, banita, they say in some places along the coast, the coastal towns, braiding is called building up someone's hair. Now, you can believe that. Building someone's hair up. They're building it. That's the word that they use. They say, we're building her hair. We turned it into these fancy braids. So what did God do? He braided her hair before he brought her to Adam. He fixed up. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful idea. Where is it written? It's from this idea, my friends, that God understood human beings. And he understood human beings. Well, she was naked, but her hair looked beautiful. Because what is it saying is that God fixed up his creation and made her even more beautiful, and that God cared about making her beautiful for Adam, which of course means that to some extent, that's what we do with a bride on her wedding day. We build her up, we fix her up, we make her beautiful on her wedding day because we're being like God. What? No, they're coming up with a serious answer. They have a serious problem, which is they have to come up with an answer for why these words. But what they do is they come up with a lesson. And the lesson here is that when you fix up a bride on her wedding day, you are performing a mitzvah that God would have done, that God has done. God did it. So building up a bride on her wedding day, making her look beautiful, is what God did. Now, if you think that this is a minor thing, do you know that in Israel today, and again, would it work here? Well, they do it in America, but not in our communities. In the Orthodox communities, there are organizations that do nothing but provide for the bride on her wedding day. So they have a beautiful collection of wedding dresses that wealthy people who didn't want to keep their wedding dress, they donated to these places, and then the bride comes and gets to pick out a beautiful wedding dress, even if she can't afford it. That's been a Jewish tradition for 2,000 years, John. So what people do today is they feel, I don't want anyone to wear my wedding dress, or I don't want to wear someone else's wedding dress. But back in the day, they probably did it all the time. Probably the town had one really nice wedding dress that they put on a lady, and they were like, hey, go. Yeah, nice. So people will do that with family heirlooms, but they very rarely will willingly do it or want to do it because they don't want to take someone else's hand-me-down. But they wore it one time. But look, I'm not going to argue, but I don't want to talk about it. I know that that's a subject that I don't get, that I don't understand. But people spend tens of thousands of dollars on a wedding dress. And in some cases, again, these beautiful wedding dresses can be used for somebody else. And to make a bride beautiful on her wedding day is considered a mitzvah. And not only that, but to take care of the groom on his wedding is something that God does too. How do we know that? Well, we're not going to get to that part yet. I'm going to give you one other thing because, yeah, Mike, I want to skip over this section, but I'll read it. But, yeah. Oh, what they look like? It's a good question. I think there is. I don't know if they said like what age they looked like exactly, but the implication here is that they were created as adults. They were not created as children, because what seems as though happens, at least in the minds of the rabbis, what we're seeing right here, is that they were created was the day that they got married. They never existed not as a couple, so that their wedding was right before Shabbos on Friday afternoon, which is why some people do get married on Friday afternoon in Israel. Well, I'm going to get to that. But first, I got to read this weird little thing here. Because God built Eve. Might be understood this way. They're just going to throw this out here. What is it? It's taught in a Baraita. The Holy One, blessed be He, built Eve like the structure of a storehouse. I was going to say, she's a brick house. She's a storehouse. It's a song, right? But it's in a good way. Don't worry. Well, it's weird. I'm not going to lie. It's weird. Just as in a storehouse, He built narrow on the top, wide at the bottom, in order to hold the produce without collapsing. So too a woman is created narrow on the top and wide on the bottom in order to hold the fetus. A woman's body is shaped the way it is because she's a storehouse. God built it that way. It's definitely a different structure. Well, a man who's trying to explain why women are shaped like they are. But again, I can not give you that part, but this is the really nice part. What is the beautiful thing here? With regard to the verse, then it says, and then again it said the Talmud just brought up this when God brought out Eve. He braided her hair. I just think that's a beautiful image, though, that God made Eve beautiful on her wedding day. That's a beautiful idea. And He brought her to the man. Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar said, this verse teaches us that the Holy One, blessed be He, was Adam the first man's best man. Adam served as the best man. I mean, God served as Adam's best man. So you ask the question, Mike, who is the rabbi? No. I guess God was. God made her, God took care of her, and then God took care of him, was his best man, which tells us that in the Talmudic times, the rabbi wasn't really key. The key was the man who accompanied a groom. So, what happened? God did that. From here, the Torah taught us that it is desired mode of behavior for a greater individual to seek out a lesser individual to assist him and serve as his best man. The greater individual should help the lesser and should not feel badly about it, that it might be beneath his dignity. So, what do you mean? If you have God's best man speech to Adam, yeah, he embarrassed him on his wedding, telling stories about Adam in college. No, the point about this was um, that God served as Adam's best man. And look, if God can serve as a best man, then you can serve as a best man, which is an interesting idea because it tells us that it's a truly an honor, even if you think you're a better guy than the groom. It's okay. You can serve as a best man because God did it. So don't think you're too good to serve as a best man for somebody. Don't think it's beneath your dignity, is what it's saying, to serve as a best man, which is a wonderful idea. You're acting like God when you're fulfilling that duty. I just want to know, what did God what was the bachelor party like? Well, that's that's the question. God threw him a bachelor party the night before. It wasn't the night before. It was all the same day. It was a very quick creation to wedding. But if you think about it, this is an amazing idea that God took care of Adam and Eve because there was no one else to be there with them. But they weren't alone. God was with them, and God took them to the chuppah. I think it's a beautiful idea. And God is there with them at their wedding day. Um, back to back to the yeah. What was the engagement ring like? That's right. The whole planet was their dowry. Gemara says, according to the one who said that Eve was a face or side of Adam, which one of them walked in front? Whoa, that's a good question. Oh, now of course this didn't last very long, or maybe it did. Remember, the first day might have felt like it lasted, 1,000 years. So if the first human being was attached, which one was the front and which one was the back? If they're not side by side, what would be the front and back? Right? Now you're going to say it's got to be Adam, right? Adam had to be walking in front. No, this is their face. This is equal. This is equal. By the way, obviously you're going to have to agree. I'm only going to tell you this one thing. There's a beautiful line coming up here, which, John, you'll like this. I might have even told you this before. I think I did tell you this. I did teach you this lesson. There's a wonderful lesson coming up here, which always stuck with me. Always stuck with me, which we're about to get. We're going to get to the line in the Talmud right now. Okay. Now, who is in front? Now, it's reasonable to say that the man walked in front, which it says a man should not walk behind a woman on a path, as he will look at her constantly, even if it is his wife. If a woman happens along the bridge, he should walk quickly in order to move her to the side so that she will not walk in front of him. And anyone who walks behind a woman in a river in order to see her exposed skin when she lifts her clothing as she passes through the water has no portion in the world to come. So if you're one of those lecherous guys that's just waiting for a woman to show off her legs, you're going to hell. So what's this wonderful line? Yeah, you don't walk behind a woman. Here's the line. Wait, no, it's coming up. The sages taught one who counts money for a woman from his hand to her hand in order to look upon her, even if he has accumulated Torah and good deeds like Moses, our teacher, he will not be absolved from punishment of Gehenna. As it is stated, hand to hand, the evil shall not go unpunished. It's a line from Proverbs we just read. So, yeah, you don't want to touch this woman while you're giving her money as a way to try to get in, try to touch her. You will not be absolved from the punishment. Right? Now, these are all ways that guys would try to touch a woman. Rav Nachman said, we know that Samson's father, Manoah, was ignoramus. He was an idiot. Why? Because Manoah went after his wife. He walked behind her. Rav Nachman says, he objects to that. He says, if that's so, you understand the verse literally. What do you say about this other verse where it says Elkanah, the father of Samuel, walked behind his wife, right? Hannah and Peninnah, he walked behind her. And what about the verse to the prophet Elisha, who said, and he rose and followed her? So they looked through the Bible and said, what about all these other places where it says the man followed behind a woman? Rather, certainly this verse means that he followed her words and advice. Here too, that the verse concerning Manoah may be similarly interpreted. He followed his wife's words and followed her advice and literally did not walk behind her. We don't know. Manoah was kind of an interesting guy. We don't know a lot about Samson's parents other than, again, they couldn't have a child and some weird stuff about, being told that they're going to have a kid. Very much like, again, the Jesus story that came much later was, is Manoah really a good guy? Rav Ashi said, according to what Rav Nachman said, that Manoah was an ignoramus. He did not even learn to read the basic Torah stories that even children learn in school. As it is stated, Rebekah rose and her damsels, and they rode upon the camels and followed the man. They followed him and did not walk before the man. So it says right in Genesis. And here we go. Here's the line, John. I've tried to tell you this many times. Rabbi Yochanan said, it is preferable to walk behind a lion than behind a woman, and preferable to walk behind a woman and not behind idolatry. For then it will appear as if he is accompanying the idolatry. It is preferable to walk behind idolatry and not behind a synagogue when the congregation is praying, as he appears to separate from the community and that he does not wish to join them in prayer. And these are all, the line is about like the appearance of certain things. But look at that line, folks. It is preferable, whatever you want to say, to walk behind a lion than behind a woman. It's more dangerous to walk behind a woman than behind a lion. That's what he said. Really? I know what you're saying for her safety. But of course, that's not what the rabbis are saying. You're walking behind the woman for one reason and one reason only. So this is this is what there's good answer, Mike. Good answer. But yeah, they're saying literally, look, if people are trying to practice self-control, the way to do it is not by putting yourself in a situation where you're going to just be asking for it, because you're tempting yourself. You're putting yourself in a situation that's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's enticing you. So they don't want people. So that's the famous line. It's safer to walk behind a lion than a woman. Not because she's going to attack you, not because she's should be subservient to you, but because you won't control yourself. So that's the famous line there about that. All right. So, well, actually, yeah. So there's a discussion about carrying stuff, and we're going to move a little bit further, guys. We're going to go to 61. There's a discussion about the body, which is not really relevant, and quite frankly, it doesn't really teach us a whole lot. But look at this next line. We're going to go to 61 B4, and this is the line about inclinations and the fact that the subtext of this whole thing is how do we get through this world? And Rava said, the world was created only for the sake of the full-fledged wicked or for the full-fledged righteous. Others do not live complete lives in either world. Rava said, look at this, one should know of himself whether or not he is completely righteous. As if he is not completely righteous, he knows that his life will be a life of suffering. Av said, the world was only created for the wicked, like King Ahab ben Omri, and for Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, who was a very good guy. The Gemara explains, for Ahab ben Omri, this world was created, and he has no place in the world to come, because he's so bad, he's not going to heaven. And for Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, the world to come was created. So for really, really good people, heaven was created, and for really bad people, this world was created. Now, what does that mean? It means that people who exist only for this world, only in this world, are evil people. Most people pass through this world, and there's a lot of suffering, and there's a lot of questions, and there's a lot of problems, because we're not going to be in this world forever, and we'll eventually go to another world where, if we were really, really good, we wouldn't suffer in this world at all, or we wouldn't even feel suffering. Not that Hanina ben Dosa never. Correct. But the problem is that there's some people who are so bad that they don't go to the next world. For us, this world, kind of go through it, and we suffer. And the rabbis kind of believe that if we suffer in this world, we don't have to suffer in the next world at all. Of course not. They know that. They know no one's really completely righteous. They're not saying anyone's completely righteous. You're not completely righteous. But if you are, if you're completely righteous, then it's almost as if it doesn't even matter that you're in this world. You don't really care. It's not really an issue. Any of the suffering you have in this world doesn't really, first of all, it doesn't faze you because you don't care about it. It doesn't weigh on you. Whatever suffering you experience, you just know, hey, I'm not going to suffer in the next world. And so you have that faith, and you have that kind of like feeling like it don't mean anything to me. So people who have that kind of attitude, it don't matter. They don't care. But if you're suffering in this world, it's kind of like that's the way we pass through this world. We pass through this world that way. They're not going anywhere. They're done. So, look, there's an understanding. There's an understanding here. I mean, let's just be honest. This is predicated on an idea. The foundation of this idea is that this world is a world of suffering. Now, it's hard to argue that, by the way. It's hard to argue that this world isn't a place of suffering. We luckily, or actually, some people would say we shouldn't be so lucky as to not to suffer, because if we suffer in this world, we're not going to suffer in the next world. But if we feel that suffering, if we embody that suffering, if you will. Look, all I can tell you is the people who just suffered through October 7th, people who suffered through the Holocaust, how do they make sense of this world, right? You almost have to say, hey, that's this world. The next world's not like that. So if you say that, it kind of allows you then to I'm going to get through it. I'm going to get through it because that's what this world is. And if I can get through it, then in the next world, there won't be any suffering, and I'll be like a completely righteous person eventually. So there was this idea that we could get, like I said, you could be purged of your impurities in this world, or if we don't get purged of them in this world, then we get purged of them in the next world. by going through a time in purgatory, a time in Gehenna. So the worse we are in this world, the more evil we are in this world, the more time we have to spend in that purging. Like I said, the more of us that needs to get sloughed off, the more painful it is. That's what they understood it. That's how they understood it. Again, it explains how people get through really, really bad times. This is a theology that really works if you're living during the Holocaust or if you're living through what they lived through. How do I know? Because we are going to finish with the story today. We got to this story right here, which is the preeminent story. Because you may never have heard of Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, but you have heard of this story, which we're going to get to now. We learned in our Mishnah, right? We learned earlier, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. The ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, right? With all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. This was elaborated on when it was taught in a Baraita, and the rabbis taught. If it is stated with all your soul, why does it say with all your might? Conversely, if it says with all your might, why does it say with all your soul? Rather, this means that if one's body is dearer to him than his property, therefore it is stated with all your soul. One must give his soul in sanctification of God. And if one's money is dearer to him than his body, therefore it is stated with all your might, with your assets. Rabbi Akiva says with all your soul means even if God takes your soul. So what is this telling us? That some people have to lose everything for God. And the expression of this is, again, what we call Kedusha Hashem, Kedusha Hashem, sanctification for God's name, which to some extent is what we have in Judaism as being a martyr. And the most famous rabbi who was a martyr is this guy, Rabbi Akiva. So we suffer in this world. We give up things. We lose things. Things are taken from us. And when we experience those things, if it's really painful, we don't give up. We say, I love God and I don't care. Some people care more about money than their soul. Some people do. You may have to lose that if that's what really is important to you. Here's the story by Akiva. The Gemara relates how Rabbi Akiva learned this, how he taught this. The sages taught. This is the whole version of it. You've heard part of the story. This is the whole story. One time, after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, right? We're talking about 135 Common Era. So 1,900 years ago, 1,890 years ago. 60 years after the destruction of the temple by the Romans, the next Roman emperors, the next set of them, the evil empire of Rome decreed that Israel may not engage in the study and practice of Torah. Papos ben Yehuda came and found Rabbi Akiva, who was convening assemblies in public and engaging in Torah study. Papos said to Akiva, "Are you not afraid of the empire?" So Rabbi Akiva is continuing to teach Torah, even though the Romans told him you're not allowed to. Notice, by the way, that Papos is a very Greek name. So, but his father had a Hebrew name, Papos ben Yehuda. By the way, according to tradition, Akiva's father was not Jewish. Okay, just so you know. Akiva's father was not Jewish. According to the legends, his father was either not Jewish or was a convert. Yeah. But Akiva came to this later in life and then became completely devoted to religion, to studying Torah. But here's what Rabbi Akiva told Papos when Papos told him, "Aren't you afraid of the government? The government's told you not to teach." So he told him in a parable. This is a parable, right? This is what we call, this is the word, a mashal. We've talked about this, a mashal. And give you a mashal, a parable. Talked about how Jesus used parables. Well, he got them because that's the way the rabbis taught in this time. They told little stories, little fables. This is very much like an Aesop fable. To what can this be compared? Well, there was a fox walking along a riverbank, and he sees fish gathering, going from place to place. And the fox said to them, "What are you fleeing from?" And they said to him, "We're fleeing from the nets that people cast upon us. They're trying to catch us in nets." He said to them, "Do you wish to come up to the dry land, and we will reside together, just as my ancestors resided with your ancestors," right? There was a time when all animals were together. The fish said to him, "You are the one of whom they say he is the cleverest of animals," right? The fox. "You're not clever, though. You're a fool. If we are afraid in the water, our natural habitat, which gives us life, then in a habitat that causes our death, all the more so." The moral is, of course, so too we Jews. Now that we sit and engage in Torah study about which is written, "It is your life and the length of your days." From Deuteronomy. We fear the empire to this extent. If we proceed to sit idle from its study, and its abandonment is the habitat that we live in and causes our death, all the more so we should fear that empire. Look, if we're going to take ourselves out of our habitat, which is to be Jews, we're more dead. We're even more dead. That's been the Jewish attitude for 2,000 years. When people tried to kill us or try to convert us or anything else, we said to ourselves, "Nope, that's not who we are. That is not us. This is our habitat. You can't take us out of our habitat because then we're dead anyways." So that was Rabbi Akiva's answer. "Oh, well, they may catch us in a net." And as you're going to see, we caught him in a net. The sages said, not a few days passed until they seized Rabbi Akiva, incarcerated him in prison. And they seized Papos ben Yehuda, incarcerated him alongside him. Rabbi Akiva said to him, "Papos, who brought you here?" Papos replied, "Happy are you, Rabbi Akiva, for you are arrested on charge of engaging in Torah study. Woe to Papos, who was seized on the charge of engaging in idle matters. I wasn't doing anything. And I got arrested. So at least you got arrested for teaching Torah. But I got arrested for nothing. I still wound up here." And so the lesson, of course, was the Romans could arrest you for anything. It didn't matter. So Papos is going to die for nothing, whereas Akiva at least is going to die as a martyr for teaching, for studying Torah. From these stories? Yeah, it's interesting. So, yeah, Mike says, like, this is a very Star Wars type of story, mythology. It is, but I think it is in a lot of cultures. I mean, I think he borrowed more from Japanese culture and George Lucas. Yeah, he borrowed heavily on Kurosawa and samurai stuff, which was, again, a similar idea of, having a tradition, having a responsibility, a moral code that you follow. And of course the sword, the lightsaber is the bushido, the samurai code of the sword. But for us, it was Torah in a similar way, in that was, our teachers were, your master, and like they have in Star Wars, and the relationship between a master and a student was real for the rabbis. And in similar, like I would say, though, Mike's point, when you hear the empire, you start thinking like, oh yeah, it's like being arrested by the empire, right? The evil empire, the Darth Vader and the empire. That there is this kind of idea that they'll arrest you anyways. They'll arrest you if you fight them, and they'll arrest you if you don't fight them. They'll just take you. They can take you for anything. And so Papa says, look, I'm going to die for nothing, for nothing. And for people who wound up, um, being killed by the Romans, it was it was it was death without even having a feeling like you had done anything with your life. Bar Kokhba revolt. We think probably about a million and a half Jews were murdered during Bar Kokhba revolt. Some were fighting, and then some were rounded up and killed. Sometimes it was, the Romans did it punitively to make sure that, that the Jews wouldn't fight back. They just killed them, massacred them. And that was after that the Jews were essentially erased, because that's after that. That's when the Romans start referring to it as Palestina and Bar Kokhba revolt. Like the Romans just couldn't fathom it. Like they were like, are these people crazy? We beat them 60 years ago. We took away all their power. We destroyed their temple. Why are these people still fighting? And this, by the way, wasn't the only rebellion. There were several rebellions. There was a rebellion in like 115 that was a pretty big rebellion. There were rebellions in Alexandria. It wasn't just Jews in Israel that were rebelling. There were rebellions in other parts of the Roman Empire. So Jews were fighting. We're fighting almost the whole time. Yeah, I always thought kind of like, well, there was a rebellion in 60 and then 66 to 70. And then there was a Bar Kokhba rebellion. It was not until I was older that I learned that they never stopped fighting. They didn't stop. But the Bar Kokhba rebellion was just like, it was insane. And according to tradition, the Romans lost an entire legion fighting against the Jews. So they lost an entire legion, gone. The legion was wiped out. And the Romans had to send extra forces into the area, which cost them a lot of money, and it was embarrassing to them. Because remember, they were also fighting against the British during that time. They were fighting against the Germans. They were fighting in other parts of their empire. But losing that many people to a people they already thought they conquered, they couldn't wrap their head around it. So the Bar Kokhba revolt was pretty terrible, though. The rabbis are careful in writing about it because they don't like Bar Kokhba. The rabbis clearly don't like Bar Kokhba. And they don't even really talk about, they don't even say in here, by the way, if you noticed, they don't even say here that, they don't even say in here, the text itself doesn't say, it doesn't say during Bar Kokhba time. It doesn't even say that. The rabbis don't like him. See, it says right here, the Bar Kokhba rebellion. That's all the commentary. That's not in the text. The rabbis don't talk about him because they don't want to encourage Jews to fight against the Romans. It's like you're dying for no reason. Now, Rabbi Akiva was not maybe openly encouraging rebellion as much as he just wants Jews to continue to study Torah. So whether Rabbi Akiva was supporting him as a military leader or as a hope that he would just get rid of the Romans so that Jews could get back to studying Torah, which is what we're supposed to do, we don't know. But the rabbis don't really talk about it. There's a real question of how much Rabbi Akiva, look, he clearly supported Bar Kokhba, but the rabbis are very careful to not really get into the details. So we don't really know, because we only know about Akiva through the Talmud. There's no other sources about him. So again, Akiva, this is happening 100 years after Jesus, just to put it in your frame of mind. It's about 100 years. And the war was like halfway between that time. So Rabbi Akiva was like born during the wartime, the big war, the war when the temple was destroyed. So he was raised in the after war time. after the destruction time. He was raised in the embers and the fire and the destruction of the first temple. Second temple. So here's the famous part. This is sometimes when they just tell the story from here. The Gemara then says, they took Rabbi Akiva out to be executed. It was time for the recitation of the morning Shema. And they were raking his flesh with iron combs. That it says, that's not a commentary. And he was reciting the Shema, accepting upon him the yoke of heaven. His students said to him, our teacher, even now as you suffer, you say the Shema? He said to them, all my days, I've been troubled by the verse with all my soul. Bechol navshecha, with all my spirit, right? Even if God takes your soul, I said to myself, when will the opportunity be afforded for me to fulfill this verse? Now it has been afforded to me. Shall I not fulfill it? He prolonged his uttering of the word. One, achad, until his soul left his body as he uttered his final word, one. A voice ascended from heaven and said, happy are you, Rabbi Akiva, that your soul left your body, as you said, echad. That's the story. So his last sound is echad, which is why Jews for thousands of years, including in the ovens, as they were led into the gas chambers to be burned into ovens and burned to nothing. Rabbi Akiva's body was tortured before he was killed. And they still say, we said the Shema. And there are Jews who said it as they were being killed by Hamas. They were saying the Shema. So that is considered the ultimate martyrdom, embodiment of what we did, which was make sure that the last thing that comes out of our body is the last sound that comes out of our body is echad, one, united with God. Now, here's the famous line. We've talked about this because that's not the end of the story. The ministering angel said before the Holy One, blessed be he, this is the Torah and this is its reward. We say in Psalms, right? God, your Psalms. From death by your hand, O Lord, from death of the world. Your hand, God, kills and does not save. God said the end of the verse to the ministering angels, whose portion is in this life. And then a divine voice emerged and said, happy are you, Rabbi Akiva, as you're destined for life in the world to come, as your portion is already in an eternal life. So this gets to the question, to what you said before, Joanne. What's the point? When someone lives a life and then goes out like this, they go straight to heaven. Whatever suffering that they were going to have in Gehenna is over. There is nothing. This world now provided so much pain and agony, suffering, and just injustice, horrific situation. Well, clearly this was painful. So what happens is that this guy goes straight to heaven. Which is why people say when they were being martyred, an act of Kiddush Hashem, we say that the martyr does not go to, there's no Gehenna for that person. So this is how death atones, or death. Now, if you say, well, that sounds Christian, well, where do you think they got it from? The difference is that Christians came up with this idea that Jesus' death cleanses everybody. Jews were saying this, and then Christians said, and then Jesus' death makes it okay for everybody. Now, obviously Christians didn't believe that they weren't supposed to be like Jesus, which is why they spent the next 200 years openly going into the gladiator combats at the Colosseum and getting killed. They didn't care. They wouldn't even fight. People were like, why aren't they fighting? Because they want to die. They don't care about being martyred. So for the next 200 years while the Romans persecuted them, They were like, fine, we'll die like Jesus. So it's not like only Jesus has to die. If they can die like Jesus, then it's also a blessing. But this is what it comes out of. Now, the rabbis definitely glorified that story. I'm not saying that they didn't. But on the other hand, the rabbis don't want other people to do that. There's other discussions in the Talmud about martyrdom. And later on, the discussion continues. And the rabbis come to the conclusion that, look, while this way to go is obviously holy, and I'm not going to say it's not holy, we don't want you to do it. If you need to pretend that you're a Christian for a few days, get out of the country, do it. Pretend like you converted and get out. They don't want you to die if you can be saved. If you can't be saved, then they'll say, okay, be martyred. But they don't want people to do this. They're not encouraging people to willingly go through this just to make a point. But there is a fine line between like, can I, and I've studied extensively about martyrdom in Judaism. There's books about it you can read. If you want to read books just about Jewish martyrdom, there's several books that have come out in the last 20, 30 years about Jewish martyrdom. But they don't want to encourage it and tell people, like, go out and find situations where you can martyr yourself. The rabbis and Judaism as a whole would much rather you live, continue on, figure out a way to live than to go through this. Don't look for reasons to do this. The next part is not about this. So they have this discussion throughout Berachot, throughout the Talmud to some extent, about why we suffer and the nature of suffering. And there's some people who, again, their death atones for their lives. And I don't do it. But there is a prayer that is said on the deathbed traditionally. It's the Jewish version of last rites. Because I'm going to show it to you. And it's I'm going to show you the I'm going to show you the I'm going to show you the version of this that is the traditional version, and I'll show you a non-traditional version. It's called a Vidui prayer, the confessional, and I'll put it up here for you. So here you go. Oftentimes, again, the person is supposed to say this themselves, and obviously they don't have oftentimes strength to say this. Here it is. I acknowledge before you, Adonai, my God and God of my ancestors, that my recovery and my death are in your hands. May it be your will to heal me completely, and if I die, may my passing be an atonement for all the sins that I have committed, and grant me my portion in Gan Eden, and allow me to merit the world to come, which has been reserved for the righteous. And the line is, Yehi Ratzon, may it be your will that my death be an atonement for all my sins. Now, again, traditionally, that's followed by the Shema. Now, This is the version that people oftentimes will say today. Kind of a, this is not the only version of it. This is one. This is kind of like a, this is, this is pretty much the same thing. Um, may my death be an atonement for my sins. Um, yeah, I usually do the Shema with somebody, and I also say essentially the a version of it that basically says, um, um, may you know essentially ascend my healing is in your hands, God, and if I'm not if I do not recover, and I usually listen 90% of 95% of the time I'm saying it to somebody who's already not conscious anymore. And so I say essentially that, and then I say, I don't say, may my death atone for my sins. Um, I don't like that idea. I don't like that. I don't like that my death, you know, my death is somehow connected to a sin of any kind. I mean, um, you know, what I say is that you know, may I be at peace. May I feel the strength and love of the people who are around me. You know, that's the hope that I have for them. I mean, if there's nobody around them, then I'm not going to lie and say, I hope you feel the strength and support of the people that are around you, and there's nobody there. But I'll say you're you're you know you're you're surrounded by love. You'll be with love. And that I tell people that that's essentially what was happening. But the whole concept of the last moments of a person's life is somehow connected to the worst parts of their life. It bothers me. The reason it bothers me is because it would work if you understand the full context of it, to the extent that you're basically saying not so much that my sins, that any imperfections I have in this world, what they're really saying is what we've been talking about the last few weeks, which is, may the sins that I've committed in this world not require anything other than my death. That's what I'm trying to say. If you understood it that way, you all do now because we've discussed it. But we're essentially saying is, I'm leaving this world clear and without need of any other purging in the next existence. That my death and the pain that I've suffered in these last moments on this earth, that pain is it. Do you understand? That's it. Now, if you could explain that to somebody in 1 minute while they're on their deathbed, good luck to you. But I just don't assume people understand the full context of what I just told you. So if you understood it that way, but to lay on somebody, hey, all the sins you had are now going to be you're going to be wiped free of them by dying right now. I don't even like. How do you lay that on somebody? It is if you understand the full context of it. If you understand that, look, I've tried to, in my life, until I've gotten to this point, I've tried to make peace with the people around me. And I've tried to not be I hope that I don't have to do anything other than suffer this moment of death right now. And 95% of the time, it wasn't good the last couple of weeks, or maybe the last. Yeah, of course. But but exactly. And you're going to tell somebody, hey, your death now just wiped out everything else. it only is makes sense if, again, and it should, I mean, God forbid, like, we should all not die in a painful way, but most of us are going to be in the hospital, or most of us are going to be told, hey, there's nothing else we can do for you. Whatever the last words that we essentially are told with when it comes to our last moments, or our last days, yeah, if I feel like I've lived a good enough life that that's all God willing, everybody should say, yeah, that's all, that's it. I'm done. I don't, I've cleared the slate. That's the hope. But to tell that to somebody who you don't even like, especially if I don't know the person, kind of thing, I can't even think about that. I mean, maybe there's a way to formulate that in your head and give that to somebody. But I wouldn't even look. I wouldn't even want. What if you say that in front of somebody, a child who's like, I'm sorry, my dad's not getting off that easy, then that's horrible for the person who maybe didn't even hear what I just said. And then the person who just heard it and who goes, are you kidding me? I don't even want to think about that. That's why I don't talk about sin as in the last moment that somebody's dying. Well, you're not supposed to. But if the people are going to hear it, the people are going to. He's talking about when I saw his mom before she died. Yeah. So I'm not talking. Yeah, I'm not talking to the person who. I'm not talking, but other people can hear me. So sometimes people can, and sometimes people want to, and sometimes I ask people to leave if they're if they don't. And his mom, and her mom, and his mom. His, yeah, yeah, the person who's dying, the person who's leaving this world. So you're hoping that they're going to leave in peace, and you're hoping that they're going to not have uh, that whatever pain that they've suffered is it. That's the way I understand it. But I'm not going to get into a full. I can't get into a full explanation of somebody who doesn't know this theology, which is that the suffering that we have in this world, that the key line is the line we read a couple paragraphs before that said that this world is essentially for the people who are bad, who need to suffer in this world. And again, I don't know if you fully understand what they're saying. They're basically saying all the bad stuff in this world is for people who are bad. Ideally, hell is here. And they're I don't know what to say. I mean, when people who've gone through the Holocaust, I look at them and I'm like, and now again, most of the people who are old enough to remember the camps are dead, right? I mean, the people who are alive today were 9 or 10. You know, the people who were alive 20 years ago, 15 years ago, who lived through Treblinka or wherever else, the people who literally walked through hell. You're basically saying what can you say to a person like that other than you lived through hell? So, which is what we hope for. We hope to get through this world. The interesting piece of this is that when we when we get through this world and we don't suffer a lot, hopefully it's because we didn't deserve any of that suffering. But if we did suffer, we suffered in the like. Here's the problem, John. The next world is the equalizer. The rabbis conceive of this as the equalizer for people who get through this world without being punished, who should have been punished. So when they look at it that way, if you skated by through here and you didn't really get punished and you should have gotten punished, you're going to get punished. For them, that was a critical idea. No, not at all. Well, unless you want to have really bad punishment, because in their minds, the punishment you get in Gehenna is much worse. It's unadulterated pain. It's God can deliver pain much better than human beings can. I mean, seriously, they believe that. Like if you think that the pain here is bad, wait till you get to Gehenna. So it's unending pain. So yeah, you shouldn't have to spend any time going through that pain. So if you got through this world and you deserve to be punished here, you're going to get it eventually, which is what they felt. That's the way that things made sense to them. That was how they made, that's how we made sense of it. So when we look at somebody who suffers in this world and they had no reason to suffer in this world, it's, they had no suffering in the next world. Yeah. 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 Well, there's an interesting thing about that. So Mary just said the people who are survivors who gave up, who had no faith anymore. So first of all, I would never ever be the one to say to somebody who was a survivor, you survived. You should be think it's a miracle, right? You know, you should definitely believe in God because you survived. But you know, they lost their children, they lost their parents, they lost a spouse. You know, like you can't say they already have survivor's guilt. You know, it's when it's going to be happening when the survivors come home. You know, tomorrow or next week. You know, they're going to have terrible guilt. There was already one who committed suicide. There was a story about one of the Israeli survivors who was released who committed suicide because he had such tremendous guilt about surviving. He couldn't live with it. He couldn't live with the trauma. So I would never tell somebody, hey, and there were people who survived the Holocaust who committed suicide, by the way, up until like they would sometimes do it 30 years later. Primo Levi did. He was one of the greatest writers of the Holocaust. He was even, some people say, a better writer than Elie Wiesel. He killed himself in his 80s. So there are people who never got over that grief and carried it with them in a way that they had to do that. But so I would never tell somebody, hey, how could you not believe? But that you were, you know, that there's some sense here because how do you say that to somebody? They have a, they survived and I'm not going to tell them they're wrong. But I will say this. I will say this. The rabbis would tell you, or at least whatever Jewish tradition would tell you, that they're the suffering that they endured in this world means that they don't have to suffer in the next world. So I've heard people say that a long time throughout my life. The rabbis who survived the Holocaust, because there are rabbis who survived, and when they said something to people like, I even heard Rabbi Schimmel say that once. When people had that kind of suffering in their world, the most horrific suffering that you can imagine, then whether they believe it or not, you could say, in your mind, it doesn't matter. They go right to heaven. Yeah. So, um, when people survived, you know, the suffering, the trauma wasn't over, and that's what I'm thinking about. And obviously, Israelis are thinking about right now for the people who are coming. So, it's very apropos to read this today, and I'm going to read the very end of this section because this is where we're going to finish today with the end. I will tell you we're going to do something special next week, and then talk about how we're going to finish this. But the very end of 63, the very end of this section, no, we're going to finish with this right here, which is the very end of this section, which is 64, right there at the next page. And this is what you should remember as we study. Rabbi Levi Barchia said, one who leaves the synagogue and immediately enters the study hall and engages in Torah study is privileged to receive the divine presence, as it is stated. They go from strength to strength. Every one of them appears before God in Zion. So those who go from a place of prayer to a place of Torah study are privileged to receive divine revelation. Rabbi Chia Barashi said that Rav said, Torah scholars have rest neither in this world nor in the world to come. As in both worlds, they are constantly progressing. As it is stated, they go from strength to strength. Every one of them appears before God in Zion. And the last words are, Rabbi Elazar said that Rabbi Hanina said, Torah scholars increase peace in the world. As it is said, all your children, Banaich, shall be taught of the Lord, and great shall be the peace of your children. Right? If all the children of Israel are taught, there will be peace for everybody. And then they said, do not read your children, but your builders, Boniach. Torah scholars are those who build peace for their generation, as stated. Those who love your Torah have great peace. There is no stumbling block for them. And may there be peace within your walls, prosperities within your palaces. For the sake of my brothers and friends, I shall say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your good. And then it finishes with all these lines of Psalms. May the Lord give strength to his people. Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yavarech et amo v'shalom. May the Lord give strength to his people, and the Lord will bless his people with peace. And that is the last words of Berachot. May God bless us with peace. Adonai yavarech et hashalom. Yeah. Hadaran ala roe slika la masechet Berachot. May we turn to you, back to you, Masechet Berachot, as we finish this tractate of Berachot, which we read over these last months. Now, I just want to again tell you that this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be studying, and that when we go from study to study, we're going from strength to strength, from strength to strength, from the strength in one place to the next place. But that doesn't mean that we ever stop. The strength doesn't mean that we're not working, because we work in this world, we're progressing in this world, and we're progressing in the next world. The strength that we have isn't just from place to place in this world, but from place to place from this world to the next world. And in both places, we're going to need strength because we're continuing to evolve, we're continuing to grow. That's an amazing idea, that in the next world we're progressing. That even in the next world, in the Olam Haba, we're still going to grow. That's amazing. And that's why the rabbis imagine that in the next world, what do? We continue to study and grow. And maybe we do it in a way because we're not tethered to the things that we have to worry about, the suffering we have in this world, that we don't have the same ego attachments and the same kinds of needs for food and for joy and for weird kinds of stuff that our body needs. If we don't have a body anymore, then maybe we're just divine energy that's studying and growing, getting bigger. We're going to be there. We're going to continue to progress. You're going to be progressing. You're already there. So that's what we try to imagine. We're going to go from strength to strength. And again, what's the most important thing? That strength is going to be with us, because God is giving it to us. And again, hopefully we'll have peace too, not just strength. Adonai oz la'amo yiten, Adonai yavarech et amo v'shalom. All right, everybody. That's the way we finish tonight, and we will be back next week, and then we'll be gone for when we're in Israel. But we'll explain what we're doing next week, and it'll kind of set the terms and the tone for what we'll do in the coming weeks, where we'll really get to focus on some good stuff. So thanks everybody for being here. Thanks everybody who's online, and thanks everybody who's with us virtually and in Facebook land. Maybe
well, thank you also.
Strength. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye, Schulmans. Bye-bye.